The Choose Love movement offers no-cost solutions that keep our kids safe, providing them with the skills and tools they need to flourish. Join us in our mission to create the world we want to live in, one that's connected and compassionate. Check us out at chooselovemovement.org. Together, we can choose love.
Hey everyone, it's Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement, and I have a very special and timely guest today. Her name is Brenda Zofrea, and she is the founder of Let's Be Safe. Let's be, just the be, safe. And for over 20 years, Let's Be Safe has been providing a unique approach to protecting children and promoting literacy by offering parenting workshops, corporate lunch and learn seminars, and in-service training for teachers, law enforcement, parents, grandparents, foster parents, teen parents, and even kids. Brenda has appeared on the cover of Business News New Jersey as a 40 Under 40 award winner and has worked to help pass child safety legislation, Jones Law, signed by New Jersey Governor Whitman, the Child Predator Protection Act, signed by President Clinton, and legislation that eliminates the statute of limitations on child sexual assault claims, signed in 2010 by Florida Governor Charlie Crist. She is the past chairperson for the New Jersey State Special Commission on Child Abuse and Missing Persons, Passaic County, New Jersey. While living in New Jersey, she founded COPS, Kids on Patrol for Safety Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. Enrollment in this unique and successful program increased tenfold by its second year. And you are still going, Brenda. Welcome to the Choose Love Movement podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to meet you, Scarlett.
Nice to meet you too. Now, there's a recently released movie called The Sound of Freedom. And for whatever reason, it seems to be stirring up a lot of controversy, but the basis of this movie is child trafficking. And your Let's Be Safe is a way to teach kids really how to be aware and learn some techniques that help them be safe. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, I would love to. So, it's interesting. What are the odds that someone like me would actually know 3 different people personally who've had such horrible things happen to their children, right? Back when I was in my 20s, out in Iowa, interviewing for a sales job, my work colleague, his son had been abducted. His name was Johnny Gosh. He was only around 11 years old, delivering newspapers. He was, one of the first high-profile missing children in our country back when they put their pictures on milk cartons and stuff. He's still missing, believed to have been abducted and taken into a child sex trafficking ring. And this is a work colleague, someone I work with, And what was interesting and kind of frustrating to me at the time, I was, in my mid-20s, was nobody in our office was talking about it. Like, how do you send me out to the middle of the country to interview with a work colleague in a very, it's a big corporation, but we were like a family. The company was American Cyanamid at the time, loved working there. But anyway, how do you go out there and nobody is talking that his son was abducted and missing? Okay, then jump forward many years later when I have my own child, and I decided to teach him some safety rules, but never expecting that he would need them. I was going back to work. He was going to be in daycare and et cetera. And lo and behold, those safety rules helped keep him safe, by the time he was like 7, 8 years old. So
do you want to share what happened with your son?
Yeah, well, somebody was, one of the instances was trying to lure him out of our condo parking lot. He was on his bicycle, and she was sitting in her car and trying to ask him directions and get him to come over. And he was, it's funny, a few days after it happened, well, he left and ran away and came back in the house. He didn't go to her. But what's interesting is he didn't tell me this for about 3 days because he thought I would be mad at him because he was going to give her directions. And the crazy thing is, the place she's asking for, Kmart, was around the corner. And it was just, it was like a light bulb moment for sure. So,
you know what, Brenda? I'll
yeah.
just share that there was an instance that happened to me when I was going to Sunset Elementary School in Mount Prospect, Illinois. My little best friend Julie and I used to walk. It seemed like I went back as an adult, and it was a long walk that we would take together to school every morning. I remember one morning we had gotten to school. She went into one door and I was walking up the sidewalk right in front of the school to go into the other door, and a car pulled up. There was a woman and she said, "Hey, can I give you a ride?" And I said, "I'm here." And she said, "Why don't you get in the car and I'll give you a ride." And I had this really horrible feeling. And I said, "No, thank you." And I started running and I ran into the school. But looking back, and then I never thought about it again. And then when this all came up, I'm thinking that could have been an incident. I mean, there's no reason for her to have given me a ride anywhere. I was where I was supposed to be, obviously.
Right. Exactly. So, I realized that how important this was. And so later on, when I had an opportunity to make a decision whether I was going to go back to a corporate career, I decided, no, I want to find a way to share what I learned with as many parents as far and wide as I can. And so that's really what started me on the path to being passionate about preventing the sexual abuse and abduction of children. And after doing parenting presentations and researching this topic for years, and I noticed that during the Q&A after my parent-teacher workshops, that the questions from the audience were the same questions 10 years later as they were the first year I ever started on this mission. And that's when I decided I need to create a resource to help parents once they left the presentation. And that's basically how the foundation of, my Let's Be Safe organization got off the ground. But back to just touching on this a bit, in the scope of these years, I also then lived in a community in New Jersey with someone who then moved to the same town in Florida where I currently live. And so we're from the original same town in Jersey. 20 years later, we're down here, and his daughter, Jennifer Kessie, a young woman, is abducted. And while I was also working in the child abuse area, a woman in New Jersey, Rosemary D'Alessandro, her 7-year-old daughter was abducted while delivering her next to last box of Girl Scout cookies to a neighbor. So, it's just these instances that just reinforce the need and my passion for helping people and getting this message out. It is probably one of the most significant health crisis in our country that our children face. And until this movie, right, it just has quietly been addressed only by those who are passionate. And it really needs to be addressed.
Or has had it happen to them, right?
Exactly.
But you had it in your life. It happened to somebody that you knew, and then your son had a couple of instances. So, and you know what? It's like me. I am passionate about our children's safety, but I became passionate about it because my son was murdered, and thank goodness that we took our pain and turned it into passion. And now you said that it is one of the largest crises that we are facing with our kids. And can you back that up with some statistics?
Well, yes. I mean, according to RAIN.org, I don't know if you're familiar with the organization, but they are our nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. And their research shows that every 68 seconds in America, an American is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. Okay.
Is that RAIN?
It's RAINN.org. And okay, you can look them up. They are just an amazing organization. They are our largest anti-sexual violence organization. There's another wonderful organization called Darkness to Light that also works in this area and does a lot of research and et cetera. And they report that 1 out of every 10 children will be sexually abused before they turn 18. And I like to put that into terms where before they typically graduate high school. Think about it, right? And here's what's very scary is that even with these alarming statistics, and they get even more significant when you break it down by certain demographics, right? That are at more risk and more vulnerable, which is very sad. But even with these stats, we know that 60 to 70% of all child sexual abuse never even gets reported. Right? It's a problem.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, here's what's interesting and very important is that for the most part, it is a preventable crime. For the most part, with the right education, presented the right way, children will have the knowledge they need to avoid most of this or stop it or prevent it. And we can get into that later. But yeah, it's a problem.
It's definitely a problem, and I remember having a conversation with my sons, and I think my conversation went something like this. Never approach a car, never be out of my sight. If somebody calls to you and definitely. If somebody offers you candy, never take it. I don't care what it is. I'll get you any kind of candy that you want. Never take it from someone else. Never accept food. And of course, now I'm downloading things off the internet, like don't take dollar bills off of your windshield. And if there's a Kleenex on your door handle, don't touch it, and all this other stuff. And mostly I think they didn't take it seriously, my boys, but yeah. they did hear it. And, I thought that it was important. And this was, 15 years ago. Yeah. How do you have that conversation with your kids?
Yeah, that's exactly why I created the resource that I did, because there's a lot of don'ts there and there's a lot of fear. And my goal with Let's Be Safe is that this education needs to be taught just like we teach our children to wash their hands before they eat, to look both ways before they cross the street. This is just truly needs to be a natural part of parenting. And the way to start that conversation is, number one, we have to get rid of the whole stranger danger thing. Teaching our children to be afraid of strangers and never talk to strangers, it's unrealistic. It actually, who do they go to then when they're in a scary situation and there's only strangers around? That whole term came about back, I believe, in the 60s, when we had some high profile stranger abductions or child abductions, I should say. And you know what? It was catchy, rhymes work. And back then they probably didn't have the data to show that most sexual abuse occurs at the hands of someone the child knows and not a stranger. So if we keep shoving the stranger danger, our kids are really at greater risk. And they also are growing up in a fear-based environment. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. So when kids are walking around afraid of every stranger around them, whether they're at the mall, the park, or walking, they have a heightened sense of fear. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it short circuits their ability to ascertain real harm from not. Mm-hmm. So the foundation, the goal of the program that I created is we are going to undo stranger danger. We are not using danger. We are going to teach children how to recognize strange or dangerous behavior in anyone. So whether it's a family member, a friend, a teacher, a coach, a pastor, a priest, an imam, whoever, if they display this behavior, that's when your warning goes up and you will already know how to respond to it. So that is the foundation of the Let's Be Safe program, to just, and the other thing is to, they do need to know who safe strangers are. And if you ask a child who is a safe stranger they can go to for help, if they've been taught anything, they will say a police officer. Well, not for nothing, but how often is an officer right there, when you need them, right? They will say a lifeguard. Okay, well, that's good if, you're in the lake or drowning or whatever. But really, where children congregate, usually there will be another mother or a woman around with a child, total stranger, but that is someone safe, that a lost child or a child walking home that feels unsafe or whatever can go to, even at a public place, and ask for help. Statistically, that is a safe stranger. And years ago, I was speaking at a big conference, and I had gotten so many raised hands from fathers in my audience saying, what about me? What about dads? And before I was thoroughly educated on this, I started tweaking it and saying, yes, go to a dad. And I got corrected on it. Like, Brenda, why are you saying that? And it was truly because, the dads in the audience were caring and compassionate, and you hate to totally stereotype. And that's fine. Maybe most dads and men out there. But at the end of the day, we want to send children to the safest route. And the safest route is another woman or another woman with a child.
I mean, is that statistically valid? Do you have statistics on that? I'm just curious.
Well, if you look at most child sex abusers and predators are men, overwhelmingly. So,
you know what percentage? I'm just curious.
Not exactly, but it's I would say less than 20% are even women at all, from what I've read. And that stat is out there somewhere.
Statistically, yeah. I mean, I think I've read the same thing. That is, it is what it is. And,
yeah.
And it's interesting because you're talking about, who do you trust? Who can the kids trust? And we have this innate need as humans, as part of a society, to trust. In fact, there is some amount of trust that we have to have a society that functions. We have to trust that the person driving across from us is not going to cross into our lane. We have to trust that when we put our money in the bank, that it's going to still be there. We trust. We trust so much. We don't realize how trusting we are. And so this is just being more thoughtful about where we put our trust.
Yeah. Now this, back to, sending children to a woman or lady with a child as considered a safe stranger. Think about it. I thought about this a lot. If you're if a lost child is in the mall and they go up to a man and ask for help, I can envision most likely the man will take the child to a security guard or somebody at the store, and the job is done. I think if a woman were to take that child, she would stay until the other mom came. You know what I mean? It's just innate. And so it just makes sense. And it gives children, removes that fear that they can go up to a safe stranger. I mean, what does a child do when you teach them you can't talk to strangers, and then you're online buying clothes somewhere and the person behind you compliments your child or wants to have a little conversation? Well, they see you talking to people all day long that you don't know. It's just it's conflicting messages. So that's like, once again, I'd like to get back to the recognizing strange behavior, and I can share what that is, which also happens to be some of the most commonly used lines in laws to groom children, whether it's family members or someone that is grooming the child, or a total stranger. So strange behavior starts off with someone an adult asking a child for directions, or an adult asking a child for help, right?
Right.
We should teach children now.
Good point. Didn't even think about that, but you're right.
Yeah, we teach our children to be kind and helpful, and they innately want to, right? And they want to show how smart they are, and they know where the store is or how to get there. We also teach them to be polite, right? However, in this instance, they should be taught that adults should ask other adults for help, that an adult should not come to a child asking for help with directions or to find a lost puppy, kitten, or pet, right?
Yes.
So right then and there, if one of our family safety rules is You do not help an adult with directions. You run, you get away, you don't answer them. You
Right.
see, when it comes to stranger abductions, they can't really get the child without dialogue. Most are not taken by force. Most stranger abductions are not done by force. They're done by conversation, a dialogue. If you don't have that dialogue, they can't get near you. You're out of there. So we don't help adults with directions. We don't help adults find a lost puppy, kitten, or pet, which is still used all the time. I mean, all these years later, that lore still works because enough children haven't been taught it.
Right.
Right.
So
One
important.
other strange behavior, and see, this goes across all family members, friends, neighbors, anybody, strangers, you name it, is we don't take gifts unless we ask first. Does that mean you can't get a gift from a grandparent or an aunt or uncle? Absolutely not. But it means before you accept it, you ask first. You ask mom or dad, can you have it?
Okay.
So-and-so wants to give me this. So-and-so is going to give me, you know what, part of the grooming process, you know, one of the misconceptions that I think people have when they find out their child has been sexually abused is that, oh my gosh, I took my eye off the ball. I wasn't paying attention and this happened. No, most of it is a very thorough grooming process where the predator can groom the child for days, weeks, months, even years before they actually commit the crime against the child. And part of that grooming process is seeing if the child will keep a secret, seeing if the child is vulnerable. So
I guess it's kind of like almost grooming a parent too, right? Because you've got your child, you've invited this person into your house. It could be a family member. And it's almost like they're grooming everyone to have time with the child by themselves. And they're bringing gifts to your child. You're allowing that. You think that it's just innocent.
They are absolutely grooming. No, if the child is lucky enough to have an involved parent and in a two-family home, say, for instance, which reduces their risk of abuse, then absolutely they are going to groom both those parents or whatever, the single mom, whatever. But they are groom. If the child who is actually more vulnerable, say, you know, growing up in a single parent household or, you know, economically disadvantaged, boy, that opens the door up even easier for them. So yeah, there is a definite grooming process, and it twists and turns based on what they need to do to get at that child, which very often isn't much.
It's interesting because it makes me think of Larry Nassar, who was the women Olympics coach, and he would do what he called pelvic exams, internal pelvic exams on the girls while their parents were in the room with them.
Yes.
And they would see him respond to giving the pelvic exams. And there was there was just such trust that he was wearing. I don't know if he was wearing a white coat or I don't know, but I mean, it's, you're right. It can be anyone.
Oh, it definitely is anyone and everyone. And that's like, also, you know, there's misconceptions out there that I think contribute to the proliferation of the abuse, because, you know, parents, people in general, we believe certain fallacies, like, for instance, it won't happen to my child because I live in a gated community, or I live in this beautiful affluent community. And that is actually, last year I ran up against that. The Elks, wonderful organization, have been wonderful sponsors of the Let's Be Safe program. They wanted to do it in a very affluent area down here by me, where recently the median household income in this community is over $138,000 a year. Well, that's the annual household. The median is like 110, but we're talking affluent. And they wanted to bring the program to the school in that community, and the school's a little hesitant. They didn't think they needed it. It was too much to coordinate or whatever. We're talking 30 minutes of their time, but to go into a classroom. And they finally got in, and sure enough, a child came forward during the program. So, you know, and basically, it just goes and reinforces. And this was only last year. What I'm saying is that very often affluence tends to, people of affluence or those communities think the problem isn't there, but it is. The other thing I hear a lot from parents is, oh, it won't happen to my child because we never leave our children with babysitters. We only use family. Okay, well, we know that almost well over 90% of the abuse comes at the hands of someone the child already knows, trusts, and very often loves. So that thinking makes me nuts, because, you know, they're no safer by that. In fact, they're less. These are little things that just get in the way of us really giving our kids the knowledge they need to help keep them safe without scaring them. You know, you don't need to scare them. When we teach kids to look both ways, we don't say you need to look both ways because you could get hit by a truck or a car and your brains and your guts will be on the road. So why do we think we have to say, you know, we don't accept gifts from people unless you ask me first. We never keep secrets with an adult. This is not scary, right? Secrecy is the main reason why abuse occurs over a long period of time. The sexual abuse cannot continue over a long period of time or even a short period of time without secrecy. Mm-hmm. That's not scary to teach our child. Now let's get to where people get really like stressed. Well, their private parts. Okay. Mm-hmm. One of the most effective ways to stop anyone from even starting the grooming process is if your child knows to use the proper terms for their body parts. If they know breasts, vulva, buttocks, penis, as opposed to the names we use when kids are little, right? Mm-hmm. Which are could be anything. We come up with little terms that we refer to the body parts.
Right.
Think about it. If a child says, don't touch my vulva, don't touch my penis, what do you think? That predator is going to move on to someone else very quickly because it's obvious that child was taught some level of personal safety. Now, using those terms is uncomfortable, I guess it is, but how much more uncomfortable is it for a child to be abused? Right. So we need to get over our uncomfortableness.
And it's our uncomfortableness, which is the ironic thing. It's the adults that are uncomfortable. When you teach kids, they're not uncomfortable with labeling their body parts, that it's just a body part to them.
Exactly. So now, in all fairness, because my books are used in schools, and that is an issue that I believe those terms and that message should be taught by the parent. I do use the word private parts, but I do explain that they are where your bathing suit covers you when you're a girl, up here, down here, and in the back, and a boy. So I do explain it, but so I, you know, I believe I want the parents, and to be using those words in a school situation gets, you know, hard for teachers. So, but parents can take the program and use those exact words in their home setting when they feel their child is appropriate, which is at a very young age. It should be 2 or 3 years old. There's no reason to delay that. But that is a huge, now how, is that scary? No. Uncomfortable till you get used to using the right words. But it is a huge skill that will help protect a child.
Absolutely. So, so those are the things that when you go into the school, you talk about, and you've written a couple of books. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, sure. So what I did is, back when I said that, you know, I'd gotten so many the same questions from the audience.
What were those questions? I'm just curious.
Oh, the questions were like, where do I start once I get home? You know, it's great if you're at a presentation, a 1-hour workshop, and I'm sharing the need for it with statistics and what you need to do and all this. And then they go home and it's like, all right, how do I bring this up? Where do I start? How do I say it without scaring my child? A lot of, not say most, but a lot of parents avoid it because they don't want to scare their child and they don't know the word. So that was key, number one. The next thing was like, how am I going to fit this in with everything else I already have to do? we work, we have school, we have homework, we have sports. You know, now I got to add child safety to my to-do list. And we know that young children learn through repetition, and it's a message they need to hear over and over again. So I took all of this, and I was that busy single parent.
Same.
Yeah, trying to figure this out. And so when I decided to create the resource,
I just have to say, because when you were saying that, I was thinking about the director of the Choose Love movement in New Hampshire. And whenever anyone brings that topic up in her workshops, she says, you don't have time not to do this, because you don't have time to deal with what happens when something happens. And of course, she's talking about a school shooting, but this as well.
Yeah. So what I did is I did my research, and I looked at the most commonly used lines and lures used by predators. I set them to rhyme so that it would be non-fearful, but also because we know that when you set a message to music or rhyme, the retention of that message increases significantly.
Right.
Right. Versus just telling your kids, don't do this, don't do that. When you make it rhyme, it will stick, and it also makes it fun. And most importantly, you can read rhymes. Kids love rhymes over and over. So, and the message needs to be read over and over. So when I was creating this resource, I thought to myself, well, I can't have a story where a boy or a girl goes from one line or lore to the next. How is that going to end? And then I used the fact that children connect to characters. We all know they fall in love with characters. So I have this bee character in the book that basically his only purpose is to guide the child, praise the child for learning the rules, and their individual rhyming vignettes or scenarios of what they need to know. And these are some of the most commonly used lines and lures. It's pretty interesting that even though it's written at a young level and it's very Dr. Seussy in its tone, I've had high school girls and boys pick up the book. At one point, my son's high school, guys on the basketball team came into the house and saw it on the coffee table, and there were like 5 of them, and they all sat there and they picked it up and they're reading it and they're making fun of the rhymes and they're laughing and joking, and I'm watching them. And I noticed, though, they never put it down because on a level, they knew there was an important message there.
Yes.
And I was also working up in Tampa last year doing the program with young children. And we had extra materials, and there were high school girls in the next room and an after school homework thing. And I went to the director and I said, hey, we've got extra materials. Can I go share it with the girls next door? And it was profound in that when I shared it with them, which once again, it's written on a very young level, 2 girls came forward. Now we're talking.
How old were these girls?
They're in high school, 2. And these are not sheltered girls. These are very streetwise girls. It was in a very rough area of the town, and so.
And this was the first time they had come forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of them, we actually had to call law enforcement right there. So it's interesting that, even though it's written at a young level, it resonates. And when people say, well, what ages is your book, appropriate for? I say pre-K through 5th grade, but I said if a middle school child or a high school child or anybody hasn't learned this, they need it. Right. And there's different ways that we've been able to work with older students. They've used the program to do community service projects that they've won awards for. And what I love about that is they are now the teachers of this, of this message, but it's getting into them through the back door. They're hearing it while they're promoting it, teaching it, and being involved. So it's kind of cool.
That's amazing. And so, you also say that you promote literacy. So how do you weave that into what you're doing in your messaging?
Yeah, so thank you. So back when I was trying to create this resource, I had considered doing it in a video format, etc. But I was told at that point, my son was diagnosed with dyslexia and some other learning disabilities. And, it was just, we were told he wouldn't ever learn to read, which was ridiculous. Because, when you're told your child has an issue, you are going to research and fight and you are going to figure it out. And my son reads very, very well today. But at the time, I was doing a lot of research on literacy, and I realized the importance of holding a book with a child, teaching a child the pre-reading skills, how to turn a page, the right way to hold it. And also, I also knew that we had, we have 1 out of every 5 students entering United States kindergarten classrooms coming from homes where English is not their first language. The literacy levels in our country are bad and probably way worse since all the COVID stuff, right? But this was back when I created the program. So anyway, I was trying to find a way where we could help promote literacy skills while teaching child safety all in one swoop, because these 2 issues were important to me personally. And so I did the research on it, and I learned that one of the number 1 skills, most important skills that a child needs to master to become a good reader is called phonemic awareness. It's the ability to hear, blend, and segment the sounds of the English language before you align it with the letters. It's crucial. So think about all the children who are coming from homes, Spanish-speaking homes, for instance. They don't have the same sounds.
Right.
They're already at a deficit because they're coming from non-English speaking homes going into our classrooms, and then their home language and English do not share the same sound. So to me, the rhymes fulfill that. Rhyming is one of the top ways to teach phonemic awareness. So how great that I could use it both for a repetitive message, a non-fearful way, a fun way, and now we can address phonemic awareness at the same time. But equally important for children is to be able to read their sight words fluently. Those are the words that appear the most often in our language, and there are words like and, the, him, her, was, were. Imagine if a child had to sound out the word the every time they read a sentence. And for a child who struggles with reading, or an emergent reader, or an ESOL student, the is sounded out like he, or ha.
Oh, good
right?
point. Yeah.
Now, if you don't recognize the as the like that, and that's just one of the sight words, can you see how that slows your reading, your comprehension, your fluency, and how difficult it is for a child to now become a fluent reader? So what I did was I embedded over 70% of the most commonly used sight words in the English language into the child's safety rhymes. And now when a parent or even a teacher uses it in the classroom, reads it to their child, you are getting safety, you are getting realistic illustrations that show children and adults in the illustrations, not animals. Once again, the bee is just a character to guide the reader. But I felt it was very important to have not do this based on, say, a fantasy story with animals learning these rules, because it doesn't happen to animals, it happens to children by people. So visually, it was important for me to have this written the way it was. But now we've got the sight words embedded. There's a parent-teacher review guide, an activity page, etc. So I really tried to incorporate a lot in one swoop. And, if you think about it, I also made sure that the rhymes, like I said, are very fun to read. There's nothing scary about it. But I had to end on a very positive note. So once the child learns all these safety rules, it ends with, now the bumblebee is proud of me. I've learned the rules, as you can see. My world is safe. My world is free. It's a wonderful world for you and me. Kiss them, good night, go to bed. But basically, that was the goal, to be able to give a very good resource to get a lot of things done at once for busy, overwhelmed parents and teachers.
It's incredible. I'm thinking, like, if if we could get one of these books to every child in America. I mean, there's also a Spanish edition of the book as well.
Yeah. So what I have, let me show, excuse me. So I have, there's one version, which is just English. Okay. Perfect for public schools everywhere. I have the second version, which is called Let's Be Safe, but it's Safer World, One Child at a Time. It's bilingual, Spanish and English on every page. And I wanted that so that the parents could interact with their children, our Spanish speaking families, where the parents could also be learning this in their language.
Good
exactly.
point.
Excuse me.
Or an older sibling or a grandparent.
Yeah, and the excuse me a second. The review guide, the certificate of achievement, the activity duplicate, Spanish, English throughout the book. And then the third version is called God Has a Plan for You and Me. And it's written for families of faith, and it can be used and has been used in Christian, Catholic, Jewish, Islamic schools. It works across faiths that have God as part of their message. And that recently, I'm really excited that some very large Muslim schools in Tampa have just provided the program to every family in their schools, books and everything. So kudos to them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And this is an award-winning program. You were awarded the Dove Family Approved Seal for Let's Be Safe, which is amazing.
Yeah, and that was for the English version. The other two came out after that award, but it's the same content. And maybe I should make that clear. In the three versions, well, of course, the English and the bilingual are identical. The faith-based version really only deviates with a few of the rhymes in the beginning and the prayer at the end. Other than that, the guts of the book and the content and the safety tips are all the same.
And amazing. That's amazing. So as you've been doing this for decades, have you seen, and people say this to me too, like you must be kind of frustrated because you are leading this organization and you have this incredibly important mission to keep kids safe. Yet you are seeing the numbers increase. And can you kind of speak to that for me, as well as for those that are listening? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of research out there that's saying that overall, the numbers of children being sexually abused is going down.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's definitive, because at the same time, we also know that 60 to 70% is never reported. So how does, there's just, I think the biggest problem in getting definitive numbers is that so much of it is not reported, right? Children with disabilities, let's just take that for instance. DefendInnocence.org reports that children with disabilities are at least 3 times more likely to be a victim of sexual abuse than their non-disabled peers. And the U.S. Justice Department reports that people with intellectual disabilities are sexually abused at rates 7 times greater than those without intellectual disabilities. Now, that's huge. Most of people with disabilities, and especially intellectual who've been sexually abused, it doesn't get reported. And when it gets reported, it isn't prosecuted. It's very hard for them to win a case when the person has trouble recalling dates and people. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And yet this is a huge segment of the population that is being abused that is not part of the statistics. Now let's jump to our Latino children. And, they are prime targets for predators for a number of reasons. One, the predators know that most often the parents may struggle with the English language. Their parents most likely will not go to law enforcement. They may be intimidated by them. They may not know that they can even report it. And they are threatened with fear of deportation, right at the top of the list.
Hmm.
I also noticed from working with, I taught at alternative schools down here, and they were schools for high school students who had pretty much not been successful in any other public school environment, mostly minority. And when I worked with my Latino female students, they shared with me, they've all experienced sexual abuse. They shared with me their neighbors, their friends, their relatives, and none of it was reported. So, that is really, that my concern for our migrant children is why I created the bilingual version.
Mm-hmm. That's, yeah. It's something that it's a conversation that we have to be having with our kids, regardless of how uncomfortable we feel. We need to muster the courage. We have a powerful formula that we use in the Choose Love movement, and it starts with courage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to have that. And it takes courage maybe to have this conversation with your kids, and that's okay. Work through the discomfort. Your kids aren't going to be uncomfortable if they're young. And wow, if it can keep them from being sexually abused or even abducted, certainly the time spent reading a book at bed is so worth it.
And I made it short enough that it's not the only book you read at bedtime. You can read this and go on to your next 2 or 3, and you're still only out 10 minutes. 10 minutes total with my book plus several others. It literally takes, 3 minutes or 4 minutes to read. But what an impact it can have. And what's really exciting for me is that these safety rules taught at a young age, they will actually help protect children in their teens as well, because it carries over. Okay. Not having conversations with people you don't know is important, but getting away from the stranger danger is even, that whole thing is even equally important. We're just going to look at the strange behavior in everyone. And for instance, when you're taught not to take gifts from people unless you ask first, well, that carries over to when you're a teenager and somebody's approaching you and offering to, especially say, a child coming from a home that's strapped financially. Hey, I'll get you a cell phone. Hey, you want an iPhone? Right? Oh, yeah. You know what? I have to ask first. Okay, well, there goes that chance to groom that child.
That's right.
But you know what? Truly, that's only true if the parent knows this. If the parent says, oh yeah, go get the free phone. Right? It doesn't.
Good point.
Yeah. So, I need parents reading the book with their child and learning as well. Many of us weren't taught this growing up. And if we don't have this growing up as adults, we don't have the knowledge to pass on to our children or our grandchildren. Now, we have over, I believe, well over 8 million grandparents in the United States raising grandchildren. They weren't taught these safety rules when they were parenting the first time or when they were growing up. So they don't have it to pass on to their grandchildren today. That's why I also do parenting workshops with this. Even my generation, the only safety rules I was given was I wasn't allowed to take candy from strangers and I wasn't allowed to hitchhike. That's it.
Actually, I think I heard those same things. And you can't give information that you don't have.
Exactly.
And so, you need to, right, you're right, educate yourself. And I'm thinking about parents, and they're probably, I know some are thinking, well, yes, but it's never going to happen to my child, which, by the way, I thought about with school shootings. And we don't want to be uncomfortable. So we do anything we can to not be uncomfortable. But here's the thing with fear and anxiety. You've heard name it to tame it. Once you have the courage to face it and you name it and you take positive action to face it, like that could be purchasing the book on your website and then reading it to your kid, that anxiety goes away. You're
exactly.
not living in fear. You have taken measures and you've done everything that you can. And here's the other thing. Your child sees you taking measures to keep them safe. They appreciate that. It's called nurturing, healing love. Your child knows that you're giving them that information because you love and you care about them and you're in the moment. One of the things that I worry about is kind of the disconnection that we're now having because so many parents are on their cell phone. And I can't tell you how many times I have been in situations where I'm watching people's kids because they're on their phone and their kid is off running around and other parents are watching them, or the kid comes up and says, mommy, mommy, or daddy, daddy, and is brushed away. And I always think, what could possibly be more important on that cell phone than your child wanting your attention, wanting to ask you a question? You have no idea what that question is. You're sitting in an airport or something, you know?
Yeah. So are you familiar with CASA? .org, court-appointed special advocates?
Yes.
I've been a volunteer here in Florida for 13 years in that environment. And, you know, the rate of re-abuse in foster care is pretty high. I don't know what the exact statistic is right now, but I've worked with guardian ad litems and CASA volunteers in trying to get this book into their hands so that they could help me prevent the re-abuse that happens to children in the foster care system.
So when you say re-abuse, what do you mean by that?
Meaning that they are sexually abused once they go into the foster care system, once they are in foster homes, once they are in group homes, once they are in juvenile detention homes. They are vulnerable to being sexually abused.
And this is after they've been taken from their homes because of sexual abuse, put in foster care, and then they're abused again.
Yes. Well, they could be put in foster care, not just for sexual abuse, but for, you know, abandonment or other physical harm to them. So they go into foster care for a number of reasons, obviously, including being sexually abused. But once they're in the system, there is a greater chance of being abused. So for some, it was be re-abused sexually. Others, it's re-abuse in general, right? Being okay. Now, how great, and I did this as, you know, my role as a volunteer, CASA volunteer. We have an opportunity to form a relationship with the children that we advocate for. We meet with them at least once a month or more. If we're lucky enough to form that nice bonding relationship, which I believe most of us do, because the kids know we care about them, now you're seeing them on a regular basis. And if I read the book to them, it lets them know that if any of these things happen within this new environment that you're in, you can come tell me, right? Now, I meet with them repetitively, so I could read it every time I'm with them or every other time. But I could build that relationship. I would be teaching them what they may not have known that got them in this situation to begin with. But at least it gives them some skills and knowledge to help keep themselves safe as they move on through the foster care system. And I'm not meaning to put down the system or the wonderful, loving foster parents who are good and nurturing, but it does happen. And if you've been sexually molested once, the possibility of it happening more is greater. The possibility of you becoming sex trafficked is greater. So I think it's a wonderful resource for guardian ad litems and CASA volunteers to have, not just to protect their own kids, but to help, like I said, let's help stop the re-abuse that occurs when these children are in very vulnerable situations.
Yeah, you're talking.
We could make a dent. I think we could make a dent in it, you know?
I totally agree. On your website, you talk about teen parents, you talk about parenting support for incarcerated or re-entering parents, you talk about having community programs, grandparents, So you offer lunch and learns. I agree with you that knowledge is power. It's such an important message. It needs to be told. This is an essential part of kids growing up and of your responsibility as a parent.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the safety education is, I believe for the most part, it is embedded in Department of Education standards across the country. The very content, you know, that I'm teaching, I don't see it being done, even though it's supposed to be done. In fact, I know it's not being done because I've been in schools and classrooms, and I've even had high schoolers who wanted to work with my program tell me, wow, I wish I had this. And I'm like, you just graduated from one of the most affluent, best schools down here. And, you know, you got maybe the message one time in a way you didn't connect with or remember. That's pretty sad.
Well, and that is a kid that's going to grow up and be a father or a mother. And you're right, you know, information does have to be repeated for us to remember. And so really important. I love everything that you're doing. That's why I asked you to be on the podcast, Brenda. I really appreciate fellow members of this I don't know what to call it, tribe that's out there trying to keep our kids safe. And so I want everybody to visit your website. It's just the B safe.com. There's lots of information on that website. You can purchase her book on there. And you can also book Brenda for a lunch and learn or training. And anything else you want to say to our audience before?
Just, you know, thank you for joining us and sticking with this program, because it's just so important. I hope that I share information that can help people, not scare people. Please contact me directly if I can assist in any way at all. And I do customize the presentations for the audience, so I will make it fit for your need, you know, in the audience that you're trying to reach. And Scarlett, thank you for what you're doing, because, you know, with the Choose Love movement, I mean, we got to get at the root of our nation's problems. And, you know, to get at the root of a lot of our drug issues and mental health issues, at the root of it, a lot of it is child sexual abuse. And, you know, we just need to work together. And I think we're all better together.
Absolutely. Stronger together.
Yeah. So thank you for what you do as well, and working to keep, you know, our children, you're working to keep, hopefully, my future grandchildren safer at school. So, and in their communities. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We do not have to be afraid. The opposite of anxiety is positive action. Just take positive action. Your kids need to see you advocating for them. They need to hear the words that come out of your mouth. They will appreciate it. That is what love is, and caring. And you will feel better when you do that as well. They need to see you advocating for them at school. It's so important. So thank you, Brenda, so much. Again, the website is letsbesafe.com. And just so appreciate you. Thank you. You're a Choose Love advocate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let it in. Let